Happy Thursday, rainy Thursday today in New York City, but still hot, still summer. Billy is not in his pool today. He's got to be under the overhang. I'm inside. This is Slice of Life. We'll start off with you, Billy, and your favorite social slice under the confines of your roof.
Yeah, there's maybe some thunder sounds while I'm speaking here, so I'll try not to be distracted. So, Keith, what we do here every day, putting this show together, it's pretty difficult to find all these stories, but it isn't brain surgery. But for Dr. Robert Brignani in Italy, his day-to-day actually is brain surgery. So this photo started circulating on social media yesterday after it first appeared in the Daily Mail. It's a picture of Dr. Brignani performing brain surgery on an unnamed 60-year-old woman while she prepares 90 stuffed olives. Let me break that down in terms of my level of amazement on this whole thing. One, she's awake while surgery is being performed on her brain. Two, while they are performing said surgery, she's just going about her business stuffing some olives. And three, this apparently happens regularly. Like, this is a normal part of surgery. Dr. Brignani, additional surgeons, some nurses, and a psychologist were in this room while the surgery was being performed on her left temporal lobe. And this practice of allowing the person to perform some type of everyday task that with like fine motor skills, it's a normal thing, and they do it to allow the doctors to get kind of a firsthand look of how the brain is functioning, so they can recalibrate it and make sure that life post surgery isn't the day-to-day activities aren't impaired. So this whole thing took like 2.5 hours, and again, brain surgery in 2.5 hours, and this lady's awake for it, stuffing olives. Just crazy to me that this is really a thing, and that everybody turned out okay when it was all said and done. Seems a little excessive to me.
Yeah, as somebody whose stomach was churning during that entire description and viewing that photo, I'm going to politely move on, but it does remind me of, I think it was an old Expedia commercial or some kind of travel commercial where the doctor was, poking around in someone's brain and then using their hands on the keyboard to book some cheap flight. So that story is disgusting. My stomach is churning, but I appreciate you continuing to think that what we do is brain surgery. Hey, Bill, Michael Jordan caught a 442-pound marlin at a sport fishing tournament because, of course, he did. And by the way, he did not win said tournament. He did not have the biggest fish, but his team pulled in this crazy marlin. And I have a great relationship with stories like this because my grandfather used to take me fishing. He used to drive me down to, I think, Freeport, the South Shore of Long Island. When the sharks tournaments would be done, they'd come in and they'd do the same thing. I'd kind of hang the fish and see who had the biggest shark. And he had a famous story. My grandfather put up a picture when he was 75 years old. He fished forever. When he was 75 years old, he reeled in 100-pound tuna. But it was too heavy because he was an older man at that time. He couldn't lift it up. So the picture that was hanging on his wall was of another crew member holding up the fish. And my grandfather cut out a picture of his face and put it right on the guy's head. Grandpa, did you really catch that fish? The epitome of a fishing story for sure.
Yeah, that's the fact that Michael Jordan caught a 442-pound marlin. That's not surprising. The fact he didn't win is absolutely mind-blowing. And then last night during the draft, there was a kid who got drafted who caught a hammerhead shark off the coast of Florida someplace. I mean, what am I missing out on? Just hanging out in my pool. I guess I got to go out there and find some wildlife. Big game hunting.
Yeah, make sure no one's throwing any small shark babies in that pool while you're sleeping. Chicken Farm Heroes, I'll start on this one. Newly drafted Minnesota Vikings wide receiver KJ Osborne used his signing bonus to purchase hand sanitizer and give out 600 bottles to the community of Ypsilanti, Michigan. And I love this story because I love kindness, I love heroes, and I also love to say Ypsilanti, Michigan. So he's from the suburbs of Detroit, but went down to Florida IMG Academy to better his football career. Went to Miami, the U, and now getting drafted. Such a weird time. He is able to go home and help out his local community of, by the way, Ypsilanti, Michigan. So congrats to KJ Osborne, a great hero in his community. a story that probably you're not going to see on ESPN, but for at least a couple hundred people in Ypsilanti, he made a big difference.
Where was that, Keith? Just one more time.
Ypsilanti. I think if they say you have the yips if you can't throw the first. I don't know if it started in Ypsilanti, Michigan.
Good. For my Chicken Farm heroes, space travel has been sort of all the rage of late as NASA and SpaceX successfully launched astronauts into outer space for the first time in close to a decade, I think. And I watched with my kids when the SpaceX exploration took off. It was pretty cool to see. I don't think I'd ever actually watched one before. I'm not old enough to be in the Apollo age where everybody sat around and watched it. So I'm sort of like right in that middle of where people were like sort of ho-hum, we're over rocket ships. So it was the first time that I had watched it, but I thought it was pretty cool. But what's more impressive than going to outer space, let me tell you a little story about a woman whose name is Kathy Sullivan. Kathy Sullivan is the first American woman to walk in space. She did so on October 11th, 1984. She was a crew member of 3 space shuttle missions. But recently, she became one of only 8 people in the history of the world to reach the deepest part of the ocean, known as Challenger Deep. Last Sunday, she traveled 35,853 feet below the surface in the Western Pacific Ocean to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. So Kathy Sullivan has literally experienced the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. This is absolutely mind-blowing to me. This woman said, you know what? I've been to outer space 3 times. She didn't rest on her laurels. She decided later on in life, I'm also going to become a deep sea explorer. Just crazy to me that this stuff is happening and that it's safe to go 35,000 feet below the sea. Unbelievable.
I'm going to throw it right back to you. What, if you were to do one of these 2 things, which would be too scary to do? Which would you not do?
I would not go 35,000 feet below the sea. And the reason why, there are 8 people that have done it. There are hundreds of people who have gone to outer space. I don't want to be one of the guinea pigs who's going to go to the Mariana Trench and all of a sudden realize, oh, wait, my head's going to explode or I'm going to lose vision in both of my eyes or something. Like, I'm not. And there's who knows what's down there. I mean, I've seen all sorts of movies. There's got to be some scary squids or something down there, man. I don't want a part of that.
I remember being a kid in my backyard and the old adage, you're going to dig a hole to China. I literally remember looking for like China while I was digging back there. So who knows how far down you go if you just pop out the other side. But I don't know. Well, let's dive into sports. Billy, you have quite a couple of tales that you have to get off your chest here.
Yeah, so I don't have any video to accompany this. But this morning, I was watching KBO baseball, as I have been known to do. And in the 7th and 8th inning of the broadcast, Keith Olbermann joined Boog Shambi and Jason Benetti for the broadcast. They very frequently, basically for the entire game, they have different guests that are part of the broadcast to try to spice it up, I guess, because people aren't necessarily diehard KBO fans like myself. So during this segment, Keith Olbermann was talking about baseball and when is it going to come back and what are your thoughts on it and all these things. And going to commercial, innocuously enough, somebody just said, hey, what's that behind you? And Keith Olbermann said, oh, that's the outfield, the right field foul pole from Shea Stadium. And then they just went to commercial. Like, what? So that they came back and he said, yeah, over there, I also have the left field foul pole from Yankee Stadium. And then it sort of turned into this unbelievable collection of baseball memorabilia that Keith Olbermann has. So he came back from a commercial break and he showed a baseball. And he said, oh, yeah, this is the baseball that Reggie Jackson hit for his 3rd home run when he became Mr. October. So he has that. It's signed by Reggie Jackson. He then went on to tell a story about how when it was up for bid, Reggie Jackson wanted to win it back, but he fell asleep because it ended at midnight or something like that. So he won the ball from Reggie Jackson. Then he also had Carlton Fisk's home run, the famous waving it down the line home run. He has a ball from 1908 that was dropped from the top of the Washington Monument that was caught 555 feet below by Gabby Street of the Washington Senators to help a guy win a bet. So, I mean, these just stories and stories. He's like a walking encyclopedia of baseball. But then they talked about his most prized possession, and I was absolutely floored. And we've talked about this, and you're going to know the answer, but the name Fred Merkle didn't mean anything to me up until about, a couple hours ago. But apparently in 1908, the New York Giants were playing the Cubs. It was the bottom of the ninth, 2 outs, score tied 1-1. Merkle gets a single to put runners on the corners. And Al Bridwell followed with a single to give the Giants what appeared to be a 2-1 win. And chaos ensued on the field. You've seen all the videos when the Mets won the World Series, everybody's on the field and, that kind of stuff. So that happened. But one of the members of the Cubs tracked down the ball, or a ball, depending on which conspiracy theory you're thinking of, and went to second, tagged him out, and Fred Merkle was out because he ran to the dugout for safety rather than touching second base. So this was coined to be known as Merkle's boner in 1908. Whoops. So Keith Olbermann has that ball, which is absolutely insane. The Giants ended up, that game had to get ended in a tie. They ended up ending the season in a flat-foot tie with the Cubs and then lost the play-in game. So just all sorts of terrible stuff happened because he didn't touch second base. But I was absolutely floored to hear that Keith Olbermann has a collection that is like on par with Cooperstown. Just nuts.
Yeah, I had a situation like this. You work in minor league baseball, I'd say long enough, but you've been in here longer than I have. My first year as a number 2 broadcaster at the Dayton Dragons, we had a situation like this as well, where we had a Merkle's boner situation. It is hilarious and it is insane because, like you said, if you go back and just look up the game itself was insane how it ended, but what happened next with how Merkle's boner became this crazy thing where the Giants just went into an absolute tailspin. And the fact that Keith Olbermann has all that stuff is incredible. We talked about him on the show a couple of weeks ago because he has a Cyclones Ren and Stimpy jersey. And from after what you're telling me, I don't think that's the only Cyclones replica jersey that he has.
No, he also told a story about a team, I believe it was called the Cleveland Spiders, which was like in the early 1900s, late 1800s, whatever it was, where they were so bad, they just stopped playing home games because their fans were so mean to them. It was just outrageous. But it was 2 innings of baseball halfway across the world between the Doosan Bears and the NC Dinos, but I was absolutely riveted by Keith Olbermann's storytelling.
For my sports story, there's been a lot of baseball talk going around, not a lot of action, but finally, hockey. Nothing makes more sense than hockey news in the summer because coronavirus and craziness. Why not? I know I love a little bit of pond hockey when I'm just putting the cheese on my burger on the barbecue. I think, man, I could love a little cold ice hockey right now. But the Rangers were able to report to training camp no more than 6 players at a time for phase 2, which, by the way, always reminds me of when Mr. Seinfeld says, Del Boca Vista phase 2 in Seinfeld. But the NHL slowly but surely is coming back. Phase 3, which is coming down the pike, is when you can actually practice with a full team. Phase 4 is when you get everybody going. And if you're kind of going, hey, they don't talk about the NHL too much on TV, you're not alone. They're going to bring back 24 teams, 12 from the West, 12 from the East. They're going to have round-robin tournaments, a best-of-5 series. So all that is coming. Unfortunately, the NHL was like the first league to announce that they'll be back, but they were definitely not the first team to announce that they'll be back in like 2 months. So even though there's good news that the Rangers were stepping back into a practice facility this week, still a lot to be determined before phase 4. But for us who love a little sizzle on our summer steak bill, nothing like some hockey.
Yeah, it's going to be a little weird. Stanley Cup Finals with fireworks going off in the background, tailgating outside for hockey. It's going to be a little different from what I think we're used to, but any sports, man, I'm itching to get them back. Itching.
Yeah, I tell you what, the Winter Classic. Come on, we've done that a million times. Let's try the Summer Classic in Dallas. Come on, that'd be a real feat to pull that off.
Yeah, throw it out on the beach in Coney Island. Let the Rangers and Islanders play. Let's see what happens.
All right, Bill, good stuff today. Enjoy your Keith Olbermann trek. I'm sure you're going to go deep diving into that again, and we'll have you report back tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm interested in this. He said Tim Kirkjian came over and wouldn't leave. Like, that's what I feel like. I want to go over there and just hang out and look at all this stuff. I can't wait to find out more about it for sure.
All right, see you tomorrow, everybody.
Have a great day.